There are multiple benefits to a patient receiving a living donor kidney transplant as opposed to deceased donor transplant, or what's commonly referred to as the waiting list. Living donor transplant offers the best success rates in terms of one-year graft survival, in terms of longevity of the allograft. It has the lowest complication rates. In addition, patients that receive living donor kidneys can do so in a scheduled elective basis. So for many patients, they can be transplanted before they ever need dialysis. Patients can be optimized. They can be in the best, potential, medical and physical condition going into the transplant. So it offers enormous advantages to the recipient.
A typical living donor kidney will last 15 years. Which may or may not sound like a lot, but when you ask a dialysis patient, how would you like to be off dialysis for 15 years? That's an amazing amount of time.
We're not just looking at blood relatives or family members as potential donors, where we're looking at close friends or spousal transplants or incompatible transplants, and certainly paired exchange.
If someone has a live donor that is incompatible with them because of blood type or something else, then we can put them into the National Kidney Registry, who we collaborate with, and that is the largest kidney pair donation system in the world. And in that system, they will be able to get a donor that is compatible with them, while the original donor will give to someone else, and then that new donor will give to our recipient. So everybody's very happy at the end. Living donation is probably the greatest gift you will ever give.
Who better to treat your cancer than John Theurer Cancer Center? The doctors leading a nationally recognized cancer program? Or the ones who rely on their findings? The team leading hundreds of clinical trials? Or the ones who aren't? The doctors with internationally renowned expertise? Or the ones without? When it comes to your cancer, there's no question. New Jersey's best cancer center, as recognized by U.S. News & World Report, is John Theurer Cancer Center.
I've been fortunate and blessed to have been part of the Hackensack University Medical Center team for just over 33 years. It's a special place. There's a contagious sense of community, a huge commitment to always getting better and to keep getting better, which is our slogan, and really raising the bar in terms of quality and the level of care that we provide to our community. Over the course of 4 years between 2016 and 2019, we just about tripled the number of solid organ transplants. And when a program grows that fast, you have to really watch quality and make sure that your outcomes not only meet standard, but really exceed standard, and you don't lose ground, because you never want to sacrifice quality for quantity. Their level of focus and really their high bar for quality is what has resulted in the amazing outcomes that we see in the SRTR data. We've seen such a huge impact that we can have on the lives of patients within our community through having a really successful transplant program. We look at what we do here as life-changing, regardless of whether you're here for a knee replacement or whether you're here for a kidney transplant. In order to raise awareness about organ donation and all the incredible things that can be achieved through organ transplantation, we wanted to seize the opportunity and participate as a major partner and presenting sponsor for the Transplant Games in the New York metro area. So our oncology program, we're fortunate that in the past 25 years, we've done over 6,000 bone marrow stem cell transplants. And in the more recent years, we've been doing about 400 transplants a year. For us to be able to offer that life-changing treatment to so many patients and their families, I think about how many grandchildren that are seen that are born, how many weddings that are attended, how many birthdays that are celebrated. That would not have happened if our team didn't have the expertise that they have to be able to make those things happen.
We're very focused on innovation and keep getting better at the things that we do. So this is a wonderful organization to work for, just to watch, just miracles. And we keep getting better every day.
Our opportunity is to have a positive impact on individuals' lives that very few other people in the community have the capability of doing. We do sacred work here, and I think that having folks put their trust in you to provide life-changing type of care, there's no greater responsibility.
I'm a member of the bone marrow transplant program here at Hackensack University Medical Center. Hackensack got on the map, if you will, about 1990, and it's been a growing program ever since. We were the second program to become accredited for transplantation. Our program has been accredited for the past I guess that's 30 years now. We want to cure cancer. Or if we're dealing with a non-cancerous disease such as sickle cell disease, sickle cell anemia, we want to convert the patient's bone marrow into the donor's bone marrow. When we first meet with patients who are referred to us for transplantation, we talk about transplantation as the treatment of the disease. Is this a disease that we can treat? Is the stage that they are at appropriate for us to go ahead with the transplant? Because there are patients we might say, okay, you're really not at a stage of the disease where we should do the transplant. So we meet with them, we explain the transplant process, and then I say, we have to identify a donor. We don't have to have perfect matches anymore. If there is not a family member that we can identify, there are 19 million unrelated donors out there in the registries that we can search, that almost everybody has a half match. So a parent, a child, a brother or sister who has a 50-50 chance they're a half match. Well, when we do a donor search for somebody of Northern European background, it's not unusual to have 6, 10, 12 really great donors identified. And what I mean by great is not only are they an HLA match, but they're young, they're healthy. But when we start looking at ethnic minorities, we might only find one donor or no donors. The need is to identify donors of different ethnic backgrounds. So we need to identify more donors of African American background, South Asian background, such as the Indian, the Pakistanis. We really need donors of South America ethnicity. These are ethnic groups where it's very hard for us to find donors. The transplant itself is just a blood transfusion. We bring this bag of what looks like blood into the room, check the patient's armband, making sure it's their cells, because there is this what we call chain of custody, chain of identity, that we need to know that the cells we collected from that donor have been handled in a proper manner and have been brought through all the processing steps with good identity and good custody. And then we bring that to the patient's bedside. Again, check their armband, hang it up on the IV pole and let it run in. That's the transplant. Living donor transplantation has become greatly more successful. I sat with a woman in 1980 and said, you're 40 years of age, you're too old for a transplant. And now we routinely transplant people in their 70s. The advantage of Hackensack University Medical Center is that it is a community-based program and that patient care is our #1 priority. So that when people come here and are undergoing their treatment here, they're treated with a team of physicians, nurse practitioners, advanced practice nurses of other skills, the nurse navigators, the dietitians, the physical therapists, all the way down to the people who help keep the rooms clean and the nursing aides. Everybody is a member of the team and they're all respected as a member of the team. I've been here at Hackensack for 20 years and I just believe that Hackensack University Medical Center is just an ideal place to give patient care. I really enjoy coming here every day to work.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia at 29 years old, and I've been super healthy my entire life. I've never had any major health problem or ailment ever. I hadn't even needed to go to, well, I guess I did end up needing to go to a doctor, but I hadn't been seeing my regular doctor for years. It was just completely out of the blue. The symptoms started really mild and then very quickly became very, very apparent that something serious was going on. I was almost passing out at the gym in between reps or whatever. And then it got to a point where I was so tired and in so much pain that I could not physically walk myself up a flight of stairs without needing to take a break. The day that I got back from my vacation, I had to go to my doctor immediately because I could not even make it through the night without then vomiting or almost passing out from the pain of my migraines. And one day later, I was in the emergency room because all of my blood levels were so critical that I needed 2 blood transfusions immediately. And then I was diagnosed with cancer at 29. So no less than a week later, I was admitted into the hospital for induction chemo, which is 7 days of chemotherapy straight, 2 different types of chemo, 24/7. And then after that, we got ready for transplant. I knew that it was super serious if they were referring me to a hematologist and an oncologist. So I had kind of already been mentally preparing myself for my worst case scenario. So they did tell me right away that I would need to go through chemo. I would need to most likely need to go through radiation. That wasn't 100% certain yet. That was dependent on, number one, how I went through treatment, if I had a full remission from induction therapy, a bunch of other factors. But because of the one gene mutation I have, which is the FLT3 mutation, I should say, that dramatically increases my chance of relapse if I didn't get a bone marrow transplant. My father was a half match, of course. My mother was a half match, but they don't prefer to use half matches, especially from someone who's a little bit older, if they can avoid it. And my brother wasn't even a half match for me. So they relied then on going on to the registry to find a donor for me through the Be the Match registry. And they couldn't find me a donor there as well. I was a little bit naive at the time too, because I had thought that it was just a guarantee that I would find a match. I thought that's just what happened. Like, there's millions of people on the registry. For sure, I'll find a match. It's got to be the same as just like finding a blood donor. Not the same, and completely different and super complex.
So I donated bone marrow to my cousin, Nicole Balcow. I obviously didn't really know anything about bone marrow donations or what they're for, how they worked. I just remember at some point in the whole process, again, I'm pretty sure it was my mother reached out to me and said like, hey, they need a match for Nicole. So if you do this cheek swab test, they can tell if you're a match. So I was like, simple enough. Why not? Really no reason not to do it. From there, we kind of got the ball rolling on how I was going to get up there to do the donation, which was more difficult than I would have liked, only because of my end of the situation. My chain of command was kind of, I don't want to say making things difficult, but they were making things difficult a little bit. And eventually I got the help I needed from them to get home and go do it.
We called the Red Cross and we called governor's offices. I mean, we reached out to anybody and everybody that could possibly help. And luckily the Red Cross, and I didn't know the Red Cross really helped facilitate with things like this, especially involving the military. I always thought that the Red Cross just donated blood and was there in natural disasters, humanitarian crises.
Nicole kind of took matters into her own hands, which ended up being a great thing because I wasn't even aware of this option. And she contacted the American Red Cross and they sent out a message to my department, which was received by my department's Master Chief. And as soon as my department's Master Chief got that message, she came and found me that day and was like, hey, you're leaving tomorrow. Don't even worry about it. So she kind of made things happen. And that's how that worked.
I was in touch with Mitch quite frequently following my transplant. And then I had ended up seeing him for Thanksgiving, which was about a month after I got released from the hospital. So it was like a really special experience to see him so soon after everything. And I remember I was so excited to see him because it was the first time that I had seen him since the transplant, since all of it, really went down. And I just felt, it was very on brand too, that it was on Thanksgiving Day. But I just felt such immense gratitude for what he had done. And I know that I wouldn't have done the same thing for him in a heartbeat. Anybody in our family would have. But I just felt like it brought us so much closer together because now we have like this kind of weird bond. I share the man's DNA. So when you're in that low of a place, sometimes it's very easy to lose sight of any hope or any positivity to come out of the situation and that it will get better. So Dr. Rowley was on my transplant team. He led the transplant team and he is the nicest man and has the best bedside manner. And at a point when I had already felt so defeated and I was so frustrated with the transplant process because it was an absolute logistical nightmare, he really helped ease my mind with the facts and, answering all the questions that I would have. And he was really there for me for anything that I needed throughout the whole process and kind of helped calm me down a little bit. To get tested, it's like sticking a Q-tip in your nose. It takes 2 seconds. It's totally free, no cost to you, zero inconvenience. I cannot, and besides all that, I can't think of a single excuse or reason that would justify not potentially saving a life.
At Hackensack University Medical Center, we provide abdominal organ transplantation. We specialize in kidney and pancreas transplantation for children and adults. We've been practicing transplantation here for over 20 years. And over the last 5 years, we've been able to recruit some of the world leaders in organ transplantation to be able to provide truly comprehensive medical care for the advancement of end-stage organ disease for kidney patients. What really sets Hackensack aside from other centers is that we are extremely innovative and we are able to provide advanced matching techniques, perfusion support systems for organs for rehabilitation, and advanced living donation models, so we're able to really provide the full spectrum of healthcare for end-stage kidney disease so patients can get better access to kidney transplant with better survival outcomes. So the mainstay of doing a pancreas transplant is to really cure diabetes. It is the only known cure for diabetes that exists at this time. Success rates in pancreas transplant have improved dramatically since the beginning of pancreas transplant in the 1960s. And the biggest take-home message has really been in two areas. One is the technique in the surgery that we provide. Early on, and many decades ago, there were higher complication rates, but because of advances in the surgical technique, by placing a new whole pancreas into the abdomen, the outcomes have been dramatically better for patients. On top of that, the immunosuppression, the medicines we give to prevent rejection have changed so dramatically over 20 years that the rejection rates for a pancreas, which used to be very, very high back in the 70s and 80s, are now very, very low, in about a 10 to 15% low rejection rate. So those two really big changes in the last few decades have made outcomes for pancreas transplant remarkably good and remain among the best treatments for comparing to insulin therapy, as good if not better at curing diabetes. Every patient's a little bit different, and it really comes down to how well they're tolerating the current treatment for diabetes. The most common treatment is surely insulin therapy through injections or by taking anti-diabetes pills, which lower the sugar after we eat. Since we live off of sugar, everything we eat has sugar, the disease is so dangerous in that everything you put in your mouth makes you worse, theoretically. So diet control and medical treatments are so important to managing lifelong diabetes. But the real risk factor with pancreas failure or type 1 diabetes is development of cardiovascular disease. Another great indication for pancreas transplant is in combination with the kidney. Since diabetes is the #1 cause of kidney failure in the United States, renal disease is very deadly and requires transplantation as well. So getting a new kidney at the same time as a new pancreas does two things. One, they develop a new organ to prevent them from going on dialysis. But at the same time, if you give them a whole organ pancreas, it protects the new kidney from developing recurrent diabetes. So a great indication is a combination simultaneous kidney and pancreas transplant, which we do here at Hackensack. Life after a pancreas transplant is so dramatically rewarding, is that patients love being off dialysis with a new kidney, but even better than that, for them to live a normal life, not have to worrying about checking their finger sticks, which many patients are used to pricking their fingers for blood samples 4 times a day, or managing the diet and knowing what they can and can't eat and counting their calories. Not having to be or live as a diabetic is completely life-altering. When I started in this business 20 years ago, I would tell people a pancreas would only last for 5 to 7 years. Today, I'm telling people that a pancreas will last for 17 to 20 years, and so their diabetes is cured for that whole time period. Human organs are so limited right now because the deceased donor pool is limiting, the living donor pool is limiting, and to be honest, the diseases are just so prevalent. Diabetes is getting worse, hypertension is getting worse, and those are the two biggest diseases in the United States for kidney disease. Well, we need a new donor resource. But not only that, but we have to maximize our current donor resource that we don't get enough out of. And so we need to really raise awareness, which is a whole important point of the Transplant Games, is not only to celebrate the success, but to raise awareness and to really celebrate the lives of the donors who donate, and to make sure that people are aware that this is a life-saving gift, this is an absolute miracle for people in need.
So the Living Donor Program at Hackensack University Medical Center is very active. We have performed to date more than 100% of what we did 2 years ago. So we're very excited and eager to continue on that path. We're getting the word out, we're getting education out, we're getting outreach, and more people are coming and more people are finding live donors. The current program started about 4 years ago with the new leadership that came on, and with that new leadership, there's been an opportunity for growth, education, outreach to the community, like we've said, and a concerted effort to make sure that we can maximize the transplant options to all our patients. When a kidney is available, we consider that kidney to be innocent and working and great, and we should work with it. So we really make our best efforts to take kidneys that arrive at our doorstep and make them work. Living donor is certainly the best option for somebody who's on dialysis, who needs a kidney transplant. A living donor lasts the longest. It is available almost immediately if the living donor is there, and there's usually a better match because the living donor is often a relative. Could be a brother, a spouse, a sister. So living donation is number one. Deceased donation is number two. Dialysis is number three. So that's the categories. So living donor chain is usually started by an altruistic donor. So what that means is a donor that comes to us and says, I would like to donate. And then we say, to who? And they say, to anybody. So at that time, we engage with the National Kidney Registry, and that donor is able to donate their kidney to someone on the list and in that registry, and then the donor that could not donate to that person, they then donate and start a whole chain of transplants. So you can envision 5, 10, 20, 30 people getting transplanted as a result of the one donation, because that first donor facilitated the starting of the chain. That first donor does not need a kidney back. He has no recipient, he just gives. And because of that extra special gift, then a whole chain of transplants can occur. If someone has a live donor that is incompatible with them because of blood type or something else, then we can put them into the National Kidney Registry, who we collaborate with, and that is the largest kidney pair donation system in the world. And in that system, they will be able to get a donor that is compatible with them, while the original donor will give to someone else, and then that new donor will give to our recipient. So everybody's very happy at the end. We have about 25,000 transplants per year, 100,000 or so patients on the waiting list, so it takes years to get, and as soon as we transplant, more people get on the list because more people become end-stage renal disease. So the growth of end-stage renal disease and dialysis is greater than our transplant rate if we were able to utilize the full potential of living donation. We can get rid of the wait list, get rid of dialysis, and many nephrologists will be out of business, but that's okay for the patient. We've been very successful in this last year, going 100% what we did before. So the trajectory looks good. Part of that is outreach, education, collaboration with community organizations such as Renewal in Brooklyn, and with the National Kidney Registry, and with the local nephrologist. We have many patients that elect to come to us before we even got to them because they looked up on the internet the outcomes of local centers in New Jersey and in New York, and they saw that Hackensack is the fastest to transplant and has the best outcomes on the Eastern Seaboard.
We invested in pumping. We have perfusion specialists that kind of put the kidney on a machine and wake the kidney up. So we're not waking it up when we transplant. It's kind of woken up and almost ready to go before we transplant it, and it's really helped with the outcomes as well, decreased the length of stay for patients too. So that's been fabulous, and we're the only ones in New Jersey that pump right here on site. Could you imagine what the wait would be like to get a phone call that says that your kidney is here? And imagine being the transplant coordinator who gets to make that phone call. right? To say, hey, your kidney is here. Your life is going to change. Come to Hackensack. We've got you. So I think that's amazing.
How you doing? My name is Sean Green. I have a rare kidney disease called FSGS. I was in California and I wasn't able to keep anything down. So everything I would eat would just throw back up. So then I flew back to New York. I was real out of it, like very tired. I had no idea what was going on. I did some blood work and I remember getting a phone call from my doctor. It was like, Mr. Green, you need to go to the hospital now. So that's when I ended up going to Hackensack emergency room. And when I went there, I discovered my kidneys has completely shut down. They was actually amazed that I was even still functioning because it was just completely done. And then I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks. I had a port put in my chest. I had to use the port until they put what they call on my arm was a fistula. So I was using the port until it matured. Then when I got on dialysis, I was on dialysis 3 times a week, 4 hours each day. And when I was on dialysis, I would be completely out of it for that day. I went on dialysis for a year, but it was a year process just waiting for the transplant. Turns out my mother, she offered, but she couldn't do it because she has a bad back. So they wouldn't let her do it. And then my sister ended up donating. She donated her kidney to me in, let's say, 2003. It's actually amazing because it seems like as soon as you get the kidney, you instantly feel better. It's almost like within days, you know what I mean? Like you just have your energy, your complexion comes back, your skin starts lightening back up. It's almost like you're right back to normal. After I got the first transplant, my numbers started going up again. So they didn't know what was going on. That's when I discovered I had the disease called FSGS. I remember times literally it's like stepping out my clothes and just falling into bed. That's how out of it I was because my kidney function might have been down to about less than 10%, the new transplant kidney.
He actually, he came to us when I didn't know what's going on. And I told him right there, I was like, well, Dad, I just know I got you, no problem. And I couldn't stand to just watch that. So that's why I was so inclined to be like, let me help you.
He was so excited, which was very weird. He called the doctor's office at 9:00 at night to let them know he was going to be a donor. I actually said no. And it was, I remember going to see the kidney doctor and they kind of, when I was very hesitant about it. You understand, he's still a young man. He has his whole life ahead of him. So at that point, it was like, nah, I'm good. But I do remember going to talk to the doctor, the kidney, I'd say, who was going to probably was talking about the surgery. And he gave me some information that made me feel a little bit assuring, where it was like, if something happened to him, he would go to the head of the list. So I never had to worry about him, going on dialysis. That was important to me. It was like I said, it was a tough decision for me. It really was.
My reasoning was, okay, it's my dad. My dad needs a kidney. I want to help my father. So I don't go any further than that. If I could help him, I'm glad to do it. I had a bunch of tests, a bunch of blood work. It was a lot of coming back and forth, being told all the precautions of what could happen, making sure I understood the risks, making sure what I would understand for the future. I absorbed all of that and I said, okay, we're good.
I actually told my sister no the first time too when she said it. I was like, no, I'm not taking that. I was like, I'm gonna wait. And I think they was like, it's gonna be 8 years. Now let's be clear, I was very happy when I got it though. So I'm glad I didn't have to wait the 8 years. The thing that I had to reflect on that I really didn't think about till afterwards was what my wife was going through. The fact that you have your husband over here on one table and your son on another table. And she had to be terrified. And she doesn't get none of the credit, just this guy. But she deserves a lot too.
Some of my friends were like, what? An organ? Wait, since when did you decide this? Are you gonna be okay? And they were like, dude.
So my friends, he's a superhero. And all of them just be like, wow, your son did what for you? My friends couldn't even believe it.
Well, ironically and kind of, I guess poetically, was that the right word for it? It was around Father's Day. So the fact that unintentionally I gave my father pretty much a gift at life.
Absolutely.
Which is on Father's Day, it's one of the best gifts I could have gave him for Father's Day. It's beautiful when you look at it.
If you must say so yourself, right?
You know,
it's like you're in debt forever. And you're okay with it, believe it or not. Like, oh, that's fine. But that's the thing. That's why I said I'm in debt forever. Because you can't say thank you every day, but you find yourself feeling thankful every day. So I will tell you, there's no feeling like that. And you can't even put it to words because somebody did give you a new lease on life. So there's nothing you can really say that's going to actually sum it up. So it's something you carry inside yourself where you're like, wow, that was a lot, you know? Okay, young fella, I'm very grateful. I'm thankful for you giving me the kidney, and I love you.
I love you too.
I'm very grateful that I'm still here.
That's me and my donor when we went to celebrate our first anniversary.
With a new kidney, I have strength.
They gave me a new lease on life.
I'm still going everywhere and exploring new places.
Nobody thought I was going to be here. Nobody.
And I look forward to getting older with my wife. That's possible now.
We're transforming lives through innovative kidney treatments, living donor programs, and world-renowned care at 2 of New Jersey's premier hospitals.
They gave me my normal life back. It's a blessing.
RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.
I think we were fortunate at St. Barnabas to really have a very diverse and experienced transplant team. We have not just physicians and surgeons, but dozens of nurses and nurse practitioners, social workers, pharmacists, assistants, and many other specialists that really are required to make a transplant occur and for a transplant to be successful. Our program has really seen everything possible in terms of the most complicated patients, whether they receive a living donor transplant or a deceased donor transplant. And I think everyone on our team is really committed to the best possible outcome for these transplant recipients.
Well, we feel that over the course of many years, we have built really one of the, if not the finest living donor program in the country. Not just in terms of the number of living donor transplants that we do, but the terms in which patients are educated and they're taken through the donation process.
The living donor program had been around for many years, and it was relatively small, and under Dr. Molgaonkar more than 20 years ago, realizing that the waiting time for kidney transplants had become quite long, both in New Jersey as well as the rest of the country, he focused upon living donation. He was able to put in place the structure to help us evaluate not just people who wanted a kidney transplant, but also people who wanted a living donor.
Our use over the years of innovative programs where we're not just looking at blood relatives or family members as potential donors, where we're looking at close friends or spousal transplants or incompatible transplants, and certainly paired exchange, which was really pioneered by Dr. Molgaonkar. There are multiple benefits to a patient receiving a living donor kidney transplant as opposed to deceased donor transplant, or what's commonly referred to as the waiting list. Living donor transplant offers the best success rates in terms of one-year graft survival, in terms of longevity of the allograft. It has the lowest complication rates. In addition, patients that receive living donor kidneys can do so in a scheduled elective basis. So for many patients, they can be transplanted before they ever need dialysis, as opposed to waiting for up to, in this area of the country, perhaps 5 years, waiting on the waiting list while you're undergoing dialysis. And that really takes a toll on patients when they wait for that long a period of time. Also, the living donor transplant is scheduled. It's electively scheduled, so patients can be optimized. They can be in the best, potential medical and physical condition going into the transplant. So it offers enormous advantages to the recipient.
And a living donor transplant is really unusual in that it requires the coordination of the medical evaluations of 2 different patients, the donor and the recipient. So I think under our prior chief, Dr. Molgaonkar, he was really able to put in place the structure and resources to help us grow our living donor program, and really to help us help all these donors in New Jersey and throughout the region help their loved ones and their recipients.
I'm Al, and I'm a living kidney donor.
Hi, I'm Ted. I'm a living donor kidney recipient.
I'm Tony, and I'm a living kidney donor.
I'm Kristen, and I'm a living donor kidney recipient.
I'm Stacy, and I'm a living donor kidney recipient.
My sister Kristen, she got sick, and I think it was a 5-year process until finally it became that she was going to need a kidney. She had a lot of friends flooding the hospital with information to start searching, and she found a match, but right at the end of all the testing, that person found out that she had a form of cancer. I asked, what do we need to do to get this done? And that's when they mentioned the sharing thing where you give to a stranger.
My uncle has had issues with high blood pressure and went into kidney failure in April of 2017. He was told he needed to go on dialysis and looking for a new kidney, getting a transplant. Right away, I told my family that I was gonna get tested and try to be a donor for him.
I donated a kidney on behalf of my husband, Glenn, in August of 2018, August 15th, 2018 to be exact. Glenn had been suffering with kidney disease and on dialysis for almost 7 years. I was not a match for him. However, we went through the living donation program at St. Barnabas, and I was able to donate to someone else in an exchange, a kidney exchange. And then Glenn also received a kidney in that exchange.
In the world of kidney transplantation, we have that other avenue, which is living donation. So a patient in need of a transplant may come to us and say, I have someone that wishes to donate a kidney for me or to me. And then the question becomes, in what avenue is that done? Some patients can be a match. So we look initially if the intended donor is a match, and that is based on two things. One is blood type compatibility, and the second is what's called cross match, which is essentially a mini transplant in a test tube. And if that cross match is negative and the blood types are compatible, then we can proceed with that transplant. There's a large subset of potential kidney recipients that come to us with a potential living donor, but that donor is incompatible to them.
I was actually at work when I found out I wasn't a match, and I completely broke down. I felt like a failure.
In September of 2016, I got on the list for just for any kidney donor, living or deceased. No one ended up being a match. So
we now have the mechanism to do several things, what I refer to as alternative living donor programs. The most common is what's called kidney paired exchange, or what is commonly referred to as kidney chain. And that is to say that if patient A is in need of a kidney transplant and their potential donor is incompatible to them, and patient B is in need of a kidney transplant and their potential donor is incompatible to them, then maybe patient A's donor is compatible to patient B and patient B's donor is compatible to patient A. So we can exchange the two, what's called a kidney swap. Frequently, a chain will be triggered by an altruistic donor.
First, I have lupus 35 years ago, 5-6 years ago. My kidney, it's kind of had problem. So the doctor told me that I need to go to dialysis. Every day she'll call me and talk to me, and then at the end we will pray together. And she always said to the God, said, "Dear God, please let my mother, open her stubborn head and accept her kidney."
In 2014, he was like, you're hovering around like 12 or 13%, and we need to start talking about options. And so that's when I took her to the hospital to St. Barnabas to get on the waiting list. The day that she called me, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to pick up her grandchild. And at the time, I was single, and I was like, what grandchild are you talking about? But now we are 2 years after surgery, and I am pregnant and due in April. So it's kind of crazy.
An altruistic donor is someone that calls up our transplant center and says, I'm pretty certain that I have 2 functioning kidneys, so I'd like to donate a kidney to somebody. I don't know anyone that needs a kidney transplant, so can you find someone within your program on your waiting list? And that is just a truly, truly remarkable individual that really has a commitment to help one's fellow man or woman that is really way beyond what most of us are capable of.
I have 2 sisters and 1 brother, and a mom and a dad. Me and my dad so he plays the drums and I play the guitar. So
I know he likes to mountain bike a lot. He donated his kidney to a random person.
That's the craziest thing I've ever been a part of, because I can't imagine the logistics that took place that day it was 4 of us. I'm pretty sure it was 4 receiving kidneys. And then you had 4 separate donors. We're not allowed to see anybody else and try to determine whose kidney you're going to get or talk to anybody.
They keep it pretty secret. You know, they give you different times to come in so you don't see each other. It's all very early in the morning. We were told at the time of surgery, about the week before, they said there were about 3 or 4 pairs at the time. It wasn't until the reunion, like the following year, that we found out that we were up to like 30 people at that point, and I think it's even bigger now. She was like the first recipient. Yeah, so her donor, Brian, who's the altruistic donor, he was the first donor. So I'm the second donor.
I donated a kidney altruistically, which means I donated to a stranger. I literally woke up and I said to my wife, I really want to donate one of my kidneys. So we met with the late Dr. Magankar and had a meeting, and it really did feel like he was trying to talk me out of it. Wasn't exactly sure why I was there, but after explaining to him, where I was in my life and, how I wanted to give back and help others, he knew I was doing it for the right reasons. The only thing I knew about my recipient was that she was a female and that the kidney was doing well.
I mean, it feels amazing that somebody was willing, like my husband, but willing to donate their kidney. And because there's so many people in this world who think, oh my gosh, I can't give up my body part. But in actuality, you can live your entire life with one kidney. I feel like I'm so lucky that somebody was, willing to do that. And as I'm so happy that my husband was willing to do that for me.
Before my father-in-law approached me about it, I wouldn't even think about donating my kidney. It was something that was on my radar. Talking about Brian, I met him at a 5K race. He was kind of amazing, but I think they're just like another level above what we do as donors.
It doesn't hurt to get tested. While you always have the choice to say no, you're not going to want to, because you're going to see how it's going to change somebody's life and get them back to being healthy and being able to live their life.
I joke and kind of make fun of my mom that on the show she was so stoic and so emotionless, but actually right before we stepped onto stage, we were standing back there and you were already on stage, and I was like, oh my God, you got the altruistic donor. And she was like, that's so nice. And she just started crying.
My life feels more complete since I've donated. I am, again, thrilled to be a part of this chain.
I feel happy because he saved someone's life without you knowing who they are. And he went through a huge surgery for someone else.
I'm proud of him. I think it's an awesome thing to do. I'm proud to be his son, too.
I've worked with Dr. Magankar for probably about 19 years. Many of them, I've always been his collaborating nurse practitioner, which has really been just wonderful. I have my career because of him and for the confidence he instilled in me.
Dr. Magankar was a remarkable physician. He was an incredibly strong advocate for the patients and for transplantation. He was a visionary.
He is, or was by far, the best physician that I have ever encountered in all of my professional and personal career. He had the knowledge and compassion and patience and just genuine caring that was real.
He was, first of all, kind and compassionate. I never knew him as my boss to get angry. He also had a really extraordinary sense of humor, able to put everyone at ease.
The thing that made him so dear to us was his sense of humor.
I came here many years ago. When I was 23 years old, I was training in India and Mumbai. Some of you figured out I'm from India by now.
Patients would come out of his office laughing, and then later on we joke that Then the patients would have to see us, the regular doctors, and none of us could really match his wit and humor.
He had an uncanny ability to communicate and connect.
My personal enthusiasm, drawing all those pictures I did for you upside down. The passion and the love comes from the energy you all gave it to me.
One time I observed him talking to a patient who was so upset about her husband, and he, in 3 seconds, de-escalated by saying, "You are an amazing wife and caregiver," and she just melted.
My mother was 69, kidney failure. From the moment we met Dr. Mugunkar, we knew we were in the presence of greatness. Just a man with great compassion, patience, sharing his breadth of knowledge in a way that touched our hearts. He didn't heal the patient. The whole family was touched by his presence and his knowledge.
I was on dialysis for a little over 2 years, and that's when I met everybody here. Dr. Mugunkar first. From the moment I met him, he said, just stay with us and you're gonna be good. I'll always remember that from Dr. Mugunkar, because that came true. I mean, almost 30 years later, and I've watched my children graduate high school, college, my son married. I have a granddaughter who's gonna be 16. My daughter's getting married this summer, and none of that would be possible without my donor first and his family. But the staff here, the doctors here were outstanding.
I had polycystic kidney disease, and I didn't have a future. I didn't know what my future was gonna be. But he made me feel like I was in the right place at the right time and under his supervision. We had the surgery, and I was on a Tuesday. I was home by Friday, and it worked out great. I went back to work right on the date I was supposed to go back, and it was like I was given a new lease on life.
Sham was quite the artist. He painted. I know that was a big hobby of his. When he would meet with patients before a transplant, or particularly before a living donor transplant, he would always draw these very elaborate drawings to explain the surgery to them. And the interesting thing about it was, A, his drawings were very accurate and anatomically correct, but B, it made the patients believe that Sham was actually doing the surgery. So people always thought that Sham was doing the surgery. Sham never stepped foot in an operating room his entire life.
I did not know for a while he was a painter, and then one time he invited a bunch of us to his home, and I was surprised to see all these paintings. I was like, you run a transplant division, you have a full social life, where do you find the time to learn how to paint and actually to do it well? Like, did you find like a 25th hour or 8th day of the week? And the paintings were actually really good. I think, what else does Dr. M do that we don't know about?
He just was so multi-talented. I remember he told me he also was a seamstress. He sewed all his son's clothes, he hemmed his own pants, he cut his son's hair, just everything. He was just that good and just had an eye for the total picture.
He could whip out his pad and he would draw pictures of it for us. He was an incredible artist. He was a visionary. He was so well-read and just really had the ability to have a conversation just about anything.
When he first became ill, one of the staff members came to my office and asked me to go to his office because he wasn't feeling well. And I went over to his office, and it was clear that something was wrong.
He went into New York to get the final diagnosis, and he and his wife called me on their way home, and they told me the diagnosis, and I couldn't even speak.
And I knew this was serious because typically he wouldn't call me on a Saturday out of the blue when he did have the surgery to find out that the diagnosis was what he had feared and that we had feared. Was certainly not a good day by any stretch.
When I found out, it took the air out of my lungs. It was just not just for me, but the thousands of people he helped, and I'm not the only one that he did this for.
One of Sham's trademarks was that no one worked the room better than Sham. He still had that ability to communicate to patients, to communicate with our team members. And when he got sick, that ability waned. And then that was very, very difficult to see. Sham always had the right words until he was sick.
He had the most expressive eyes. We knew when he was upset. We knew when he was happy. We knew when he was understanding what we were saying, and we would fill him in on what was happening, who said what, you know, the latest gossip, who had a baby, and he would speak with his eyes. Up until the end, he was cognitively with it. He just could not express himself.
Towards the end, he was not verbal or communicative. I think that was difficult, and that was uncertain how much he understood what we were saying to him. It also seemed especially cruel given how verbal and expressive and how, you know, communication was really his forte, and for him to not be able to say what he wanted and to communicate fully with us just seemed, you know, really unfair.
He was so brave, and his wife was so brave, and they were so hopeful. And of course, he gave us the strength to help him deal with his illness, and we did. And it was a very long year.
I think that his legacy is obviously the transplant program that he built and the challenge that he left to us to maintain that and to continue to build on that.
I think living donor transplant extends life. It doubles lifespan for a person. Spread the word of organ donation.
I think there was a lot more vision to come.
And, you know, through living donation, he really helped, you know, thousands of living donors help their loved ones with the gift of a kidney transplant. You know, so I think that's his main legacy. He built a program here to last.
While he was building the team, he built relationships, and his sincerity was so apparent in everything he did. And I think that's why we bitterly miss him. And we feel such a need to carry on his legacy.
We were great friends and really family, right? Yeah. I mean, it was just, we have had so many fun times. There was a day that didn't go back that we didn't laugh. I think that relationship is just priceless. And the experience is just one of a kind.
It's a very stressful, very, very stressful job. I would have to say we had the most fun, and I couldn't wait to come to work every day. I mean, we didn't even have to speak to each other. We knew what we had to do when a situation was going south. You know, everybody just jumped into gear, including him. And I miss that. We also thought long and hard in the first year after his passing, because it didn't come to us easily, how to preserve this man's, you know, legacy. We came up with this beautiful sort of mural of him and his legacy, and we hope that that will live on forever and ever.
And it's titled His Vision Leads the Way. So we wanted not just a memorial, we wanted really an inspirational wall. Because that's what he would have wanted.
Right.
He would have wanted to say, this is the path. And all the words, you know, show the type of man and the type of physician that he was.
It was very personal for him. And he was patient. And he made us feel like it was only us, that we were the only people he had to care for, when we knew he was caring for thousands. But he made us feel special. And that's a gift.
When I think about it, it's quite extraordinary to be able to be accomplished and driven, yet also kind and compassionate and really just fun to be around and a good person. I think that's a very unusual combination. And I think that's why, you know, I consider him to be a role model.
I was really, you know, fortunate doesn't begin to describe it. You know, privileged, blessed, you can use any term. To have worked with Sham for 25 years.
A colleague just the other day said something that I had never heard before. He said, when I die, and when I open my eyes, if Sham is there, then I know I'm in heaven.